So the topic for today is Emunah and the Holocaust. And obviously you've been doing names, not numbers, and you've come into contact with some of the things which have to the Holocaust. And we're going to, of course, in the course of the year, later on, we're going to come into even more about the Holocaust. And obviously this raises the question of Emunah. And there are people, Holocaust survivors, who, as a result of their experience in the Holocaust, they did lose their Emunah. They gave up their faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the question is, how do we deal with this? How do we understand what Hashem did? And it's obviously something which requires a lot of analysis. I'm going to give an overview today. Again, as I said, don't hesitate to ask questions in the future. So we have to distinguish between Emunah and Bitachon. There's Emunah, which is belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there's Bitachon, which is trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're two separate things. And one can believe in God, but not trust God. How so? So Emunah is the belief that there's a creator, which is based on many pieces of evidence. We have a lot of evidence that there's a creator. In Judaism, our primary evidence that there's a creator is the fact that we have a Masorah, a tradition stretching back to Matan Torah, to Moshe Rabbeinu, that all of the Jewish people were at Har Sinai and received the Torah, and they all heard at least the first two Dibros from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this tradition has come down to us historically in an unbroken chain from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu till today. And that's the basis of our Emunah, is Masorah. So there are other reasons why a person should have Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you look at creation is so amazingly complex. You look at things which go on in nature. You look, just look out of the window, look at a tree and think about photosynthesis, which I'm sure you've learned about, right? You have? Yes? So this is an amazing process. How did this come into being? It indicates there's a designer who designed this world. That I like quoting something about, I don't know if this you learned about, the anomaly of water, it's called. Water, as you may know, when it becomes ice floats on the top of water. If you put ice in a cup, the water floats to the top. It shouldn't be that way. Anything else besides water, if you take the solid state of that liquid and put it inside the liquid, it'll sink to the bottom, because the solid is more dense than the liquid. Water is the only exception. And the reason for that is that at 4 degrees Celsius, water all of a sudden expands. It gets colder and colder, it gets dense, because things which get cold contract. But all of a sudden, 4 degrees, it expands. And then it starts contracting again. But by the time it gets to 0 degrees Celsius, which is the freezing point of water, the ice is still less dense than the water. And therefore, ice floats to the top of the water, it doesn't sink to the bottom of your cup. And this is very important because we're ice to be more dense than water, so every winter when a pond froze, it wouldn't freeze at the top like it does nowadays, leaving the pond liquid at the bottom. It freezes at the bottom. The ice would sink to the bottom. And all the sources of nourishment for the fish would be killed. The fish themselves would die because they have nothing to feed on. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, somebody, whoever designed the world that instead of the ice forming on the bottom, it forms on the top because ice is less dense than water, and therefore all the fish, all the marine life can survive through the winter. People go ice fishing in the middle of the winter because it's all there underneath. So it doesn't make sense. Hydrogen itself, oxygen itself, the two components of water, when they each freeze, they become more dense than the liquid state. A solid hydrogen is, actually, hydrogen's not clear we can actually make it solid because they have to get close to absolute zero. But in any event, hydrogen itself becomes more dense as it becomes colder, and oxygen becomes more dense as it becomes colder. Combine them, they don't, because they become less dense. Okay, so that's an example of there are many different examples. There's countless different examples. David HaMelech said, "Mibsori echsel loka," from my flesh I can perceive HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because if you think about the eye, the ear, all the things about the human existence, you see how there's got to be a creator, a designer who designed everything. So that's the basis of our Emunah, our belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But then there's the question of bitachon, the trust of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Do we trust Hashem? Because there could be a God who created things we don't necessarily trust, because maybe he doesn't do the right thing. So that's where the Holocaust comes in. Not necessarily in Emunah, because the fact that there were terrible things happen doesn't mean there isn't a creator. The question is how we can trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu after the Holocaust. That's the question which we have to deal with. So the idea in Judaism is that Kol mad avid rachmana l'tav avid. Everything Hashem does is for the good. That what does it mean for the good? Right? there's a big machlokus, a tremendous difference of opinion among Jewish thinkers. Some people say that everything Hashem does is for my good. In other words, you, me, everyone in this room, everything that happens is for my individual good. I might not understand how, but it's for my individual good. There are others who say that for me as an individual, it's not necessarily going to be good. But for Am Yisrael as a whole, things work out in the end. There are things things might go wrong temporarily, but in the end, everything works out for the best. Now, I want to distinguish, I hope you understand this, between the Kol Ma'avi Rachmana L'Tavavid and Gamzu L'Toiva. You ever hear Gamzu L'Toiva? Everybody know about Nachum Ish Gamzu? Right? Nachum Ish Gamzu was a different madrega than Rabbi Akiva, his student. Nachum Ish Gamzu used to say Gamzu L'Toiva, and Rabbi Akiva said Kol Ma'avi Rachmana L'Tavavid. What's the difference between the two? So Nachum Ish Gamzu said, everything which happens to me, and the Ram says Nachum Ish Gamzu was a unique madrega. It was a higher level than anybody else. Everything I see right now is good. Gamzu L'Toiva, right now. I'm experiencing it as good. When Nachum Ish Gamzu got to Rome, and he found that his box is full of sand, instead of the gold and silver you're supposed to bring, everybody knows the story, immediately he said, Gamzu L'Toiva, this is also good. Rabbi Akiva wasn't in that madrega. Rabbi Akiva said, eventually it's going to work out for the best. I don't know how. And there's a famous story of Rabbi Akiva that he came to a town, and as he was outside the town, he couldn't get into the town by the time the sun set, and he had a donkey, and he had a rooster, and he had a candle. You all know the story, right? Yeah. The donkey died, the donkey ran away, the rooster died, the candle went out, and he said, what can I do? Everything Hashem does is for the best. And later on, bandits came to the city and destroyed the city, and had he been in the city, had he had the candle, had he had the rooster been with him, the donkey been with him, they wouldn't have found him out. So now he saw retroactively, in retrospect, how things worked out for the best. So that's not, and I don't necessarily see it as good for me now. But in the end, I could see it's good. And again, according to some thinkers, it's going to be good for, someday I might understand how it was good for me. According to other thinkers, it might not be good for me, but it's good for the Jewish people. Everything works out for the best of Jewish people. Now, we can't necessarily understand that, and certainly not necessarily in our lifetimes, because things work out over history in the long term. And the example I give with the Holocaust is that it had to be no Holocaust, and this doesn't explain why the Holocaust happened. Lubavitcher Rebbe said, and I believe he's right, we're going to learn about this later in the year in greater detail, that we can't understand why the Holocaust happened. There are many Gedolim, many great thinkers, and we're going to go through them later in the year, who try to give reasons for the Holocaust. They give reasons they have because the Jews sinned this way, that way, the other way, but the Lubavitcher Rebbe said we can't understand why the Holocaust happened. The Holocaust is too major an event. Two things were so devastating that there's no one sin, or even many sins, which can explain why it happened. But we can still look, so we can't understand why it happened, but we can see what happened as a result. And we can see that it was part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's master plan. And that's what bitachon is about, to trust that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a master plan, because he tells us in Tanakh over and over again, I have you in mind, and even if I do bad things to you, we have the entire Tochacha at the end of Vayikra, at the end of Devarim, which say HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring bad things to happen to the Jewish people, for whatever reasons. That eventually, in the end, things are going to be brought back and things are going to be corrected. And there's going to be a geula, there's going to be a shiur, there's going to be a salvation. So to the time of Holocaust, had there been no Holocaust, there would be no state of Israel today. It's clear. The nations of the world only approved the state of Israel because they saw the Holocaust and they saw we can't have a world with no place for the Jews to go. We have to give them a place to go. Especially all the Jews, as we will learn, who were displaced after World War II, had no place to be. So Hashem had, the nations of the world understood, we have to give them a place to go. And the miraculous thing about the vote in the United Nations for the state of Israel was that the Soviet Union, Russia, and the United States never agreed about anything. And that one time, they both voted for the founding of the state of Israel. So there's this clear idea in history that had there not been a Holocaust, there'd be no state of Israel. Now, the state of Israel is a very positive thing. Lots of Jews are there. Lots of Jews are learning Torah. Lots of Jews who would have nowhere else to be, would be persecuted in other places. They have a place to be in the state of Israel. And Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael is flourishing. None of that would have happened if not for the Holocaust. So does that explain the Holocaust? It doesn't explain the Holocaust. But it explains that there's some master plan which we can see only in retrospect. You can only understand many years later. You know what? The Holocaust led to the foundation of the State of Israel. The Holocaust, as we know, that nowadays many, many Jews are only Jewish because of the Holocaust, because Holocaust studies, the idea that there was a Holocaust and it's studied in school and people look back at it historically, keeps people who otherwise are completely assimilated somehow Jewish. Again, is that a reason for the Holocaust? No, but it gives me a perspective to understand that it's part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's master plan. There's something going on here. I want to go a little bit further than that, a little bit deeper. There's a question also, which we're going to get into later in the year, of free will. Everybody in this world has free will. Everybody can decide to do what they decide to do and act accordingly. Now, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, who's one of the major Jewish thinkers who has a commentary on the Torah, as I'm sure you all know, in Parshas Vayeshev says an amazing thing that's coming up in a couple of weeks. Parshas Vayeshev, it says, V'abor reik ein bo mayim, right? The pit was empty. There was no water in the pit, in which Reuven said they should throw Yosef down. So you all know, what was in the pit? It's not water. Snakes and scorpions. Very good. So the question the Orach Chaim asks is, so what good does it do to throw Yosef into the pit if it has snakes and scorpions? How's it going to save him from the brothers? You're putting him in another dangerous situation. How is it saving him to put them in that pit? So Orach Chaim says an amazing thing. The Orach Chaim says that a human being an animal can't kill you, even a snake or scorpion, unless you deserve to die. Why? Because a snake or scorpion has no free will. It's just an animal. So therefore, it doesn't think, it doesn't make decisions, it can't kill you. If you die because a snake or scorpion bites you, it was your time to die. But the brothers, Yosef's brothers, they have free will. And they can decide to kill Yosef and kill him, even though it's not his time to die. Yosef might have supposed to live 70 years, just a second, but the brothers can decide we're going to kill him, and even though he's only 17 years old, they'll be able to kill him. Because human beings with their free will are very powerful. They can change the course of a person's life by their decision because they have free will. Yes?
I always thought of it that you can't change a situation or control situations, but you can control how you react. I think that's kind of like
Right. There are many different opinions on free will in Judaism, and it's an interesting point you brought up. As a matter of fact, the Rambam doesn't enumerate free will as one of the basic principles of Judaism. You know, it's 13 principles of the Rambam, the Ani Maimons. Anybody ever see the Ani Maimons? Anybody ever see Yigdal? Because Yigdal is also the 13 principles of the Rambam. You all know that? Smart class. So the Rambam does not count free will as a principle, and just something which you talk about perhaps at a different time because it's a long discussion. To what extent there is free will, and perhaps it's only like you're saying how you respond to a situation, which is an extreme position, but there is such a position. Yes, yeah.
how is like Hashem always like knows what's gonna happen, and Hashem already has a plan, and how do we actually have?
That's a separate question. It's a famous question. It's a question of Yediyah B'chira. How, if Hashem knows everything is going to happen, so how do we have free will? Right? There are many answers to that question. I'm going to give you just one. Right? Some at a different time we can talk about it at greater length. But the reason Hashem knows, it is a little bit hard to understand, but you'll get it. The reason Hashem knows everything that's going to happen is because Hashem exists outside of time. So it's imagine you have a television screen in front of you. And on the television screen you can see a split screen. You see what's happening in Moscow, at the same time you see what's happening in New York, the same thing you see what's happening in Yerushalayim. Very often in a television program, they'll show you 3 different parts of the screen. You see 3 different things happening at once, because on the television screen they can put all 3 places together, even though they're separated by thousands of miles. So imagine that same situation, not in space, but in time. In other words, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no before and after, because Hashem exists outside of time. Time, says the Rambam, was the first thing Hashem created. Before everything else, he created time. So you can't say, from Hashem's perspective, what happened before, what happened after, because it's as if everything is happening simultaneously and eternally at the same time. If you can imagine something just outside of time, just like the television puts you outside of space, so to speak. So therefore, it's not that Hashem knows what happens before it happens. By Hashem, there's no before and after. So therefore, he's aware of what's going to happen in the future, because from his perspective, it's not future. It's already past. By the way, that's how the Rav Dessler explains the idea of schus avos, the merit of the forefathers. He says, how do we have schus avos? Our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, they were very righteous. But what does that have to do with us? right? This happened years ago. So Rav Dessler said, no, by a Kosh Baruch Hu's perspective, there's no such thing as time. Everything happens simultaneously. So it's as if a Kosh Baruch Hu has a split screen. And on one side of the screen is you, and the other side of the screen is the Avos and the Emos. So if there's a connection between your activities and their activities, so you have Schus Avos, because it shows, you and them are connected. You are still representing them in this world. If there's no connection because your deeds are not at all like their deeds, so then there's no Schus Avos. But again, it's because by Hashem, the time doesn't make a difference. Yeah.
You're saying that Hashem has no aspect of time, but does that mean every a very small action can still cause a whole different thing to happen?
Right, from our perspective, because we see cause and effect in time. Right. But by Hashem it's already happened, so to speak. He is outside of that. Yes, it's hard to understand, but that's why I'm giving the mashal from space, so you can understand a little bit in time. Yes. But I don't want to spend so much time on it today. But again, the rest of the year we're happy to spend time on it, but we have to get a few things done today. So let's go on to the next question. Yeah.
Isn't it also kind of because you don't know what's going to happen? Like, you couldn't make your own decision because you don't know what's going to happen.
You don't know. Hashem knows, but you don't know. Right. Right. Sure. Yes.
When you're saying about how Hashem had a plan for the Holocaust that happened so we got the state of Israel, what about October 7th and all the anti-Semitic?
Right. So I'm going to come to October 7th in a few minutes. It's a good question. Okay. So let me do that for now, but I'll come back to that. So again, free will is very powerful. That means another aspect of the Holocaust that Hitler, the Nazis, they had free will. Hashem created evil in the world and gave evil a lot of power. And he told us we're here to fight evil. This is something which I like mentioning. I say, there's a whole controversy in Orthodox Judaism if it's good for kids to read Harry Potter or not. I hold it's great for kids to read Harry Potter. I hold for several reasons. One of them, first of all, I hold good fiction is good for you because it puts you into a different world and it works. Your imagination works differently, and you're able to picture yourself in a different state. And it's an amazing experience. And I'm not saying J.K. Rowling is the best author of all time, but she did a good job in creating this alternate reality in which people can live. But besides that, it's the classic fight of good against evil. And in the end, Voldemort loses. And that's the idea. The idea is that the whole world Hashem created is this fight of good against evil. And he said, you know what? We're going to make this fight, and you're going to be my partners in this fight. And it could take a long time. I forget how long it took to defeat Voldemort, many years. So, but I think since Harry Potter started till he finished, how many years? Oh, but he left school in the middle. I don't remember how many years it was. Well, how many?
If you're calculating, he went to Hogwarts when he was 11, right? It took 7 years.
7 years.
No, but he was still alive before
Yeah, okay.
that.
He was alive and then he was dead.
Whatever the case may be, it took a long time. Okay. I'm glad we have girls who are experts at Harry Potter. Okay, not for now. So the point is that this battle takes a long time. World War II took a long time. From the time Hitler rose to power, the time he was defeated was 12 years. So it took a long time, and it takes there are sacrifices along the way. A lot of people lost their lives in Hogwarts. A lot of people lost their lives in World War II. There's this idea, the fight of good against evil is a real fight because people have free will, and they have to have free will because you can't be very good unless you can also be very bad. That's the basic premise of free will, is that Hashem doesn't want robots. He wants people who actually make choices, and people make good choices. And if we wanted to make very good choices, then you have to be capable of making very bad choices. So that's part and parcel of how Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world. There's good and evil, and it must be that way in order for people to choose to become good people. And by the way, that's what most people say when it says God created man b'tselem Elokim. In the divine image, what does it mean divine image? Hashem is no image, but He created us with free will. We should exercise that will to be good, and the flip side of that is we can exercise a will to be evil. And therefore, Kodesh Baruch Hu said, I'm counting on you. And specifically, He gave a special mission to the Jews in this capacity, and we're supposed to be good and an example to the rest of the world of how to be good, although we don't always succeed. But we're supposed to show everybody that we use our free will to be good, and everybody else also should use their free will to be good and to fight evil. So again, there's this long-term battle against evil, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says in the end, Parshas B'Shal, Kiyara Keis Kol Milchamol Hashem B'Amalek Midor Dor. Amalek represents us, the ultimate evil. And that's what we associate always, even though it's not necessarily historically the case, we associate the Nazism and those types of evil with Amalek. But it's a war for a generation. Hashem says this war is going to go on for a long time. And Hashem says, so to speak, I want your help. You're my partners in this war. Am Yisrael and Hashem fight together. And the way we fight is by our trying to bring good into the world. Now, there are many ways in which we bring good into the world. By doing mitzvahs, by learning Torah, by doing chesed, but all sorts of ways. And sometimes it actually takes an actual battle. People have to go out to war to fight evil. So there are many ways in which we fight evil in this world. But the point is that there is this free will, which is necessary in order for people very good. They have the capacity to be very evil. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I need this to go on in this world, and I need you to help me in this battle. This is part and parcel of what I put you here to show that human beings can actually also be very good. You don't have to be a malach. You don't have to be an angel to be very good. I have plenty of angels. The angels are not the purpose of the world. Human beings who are in this situation down here, that's the purpose of the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you know what? I want you to trust me in this. And that's the idea of bitachon. Not that things are necessarily going to be good all the time. As I said, there is a school of thought that things are good for the people themselves. And there's a saying, the Hasidim have a saying, tracht gut, wird sein gut. If you think positive thoughts, it's going to be good. Okay, I don't buy into that. Maybe because I'm a pessimist at heart. I don't think necessarily always going to be, just because you think it's going to be good, it's going to be good. If you think your homework is going to get done magically, it's going to get done. No, you obviously have to do things and make an effort, and sometimes the effort is hard, and sometimes the effort doesn't succeed. Right? So I don't think that tracht gut, wird sein gut works all the time, although it's good to have a positive attitude, it doesn't hurt. So, but the point is that every human being, and especially us, because we're given a special mission as Hashem's chosen nation, has to try and work to bring about that good. And even if we don't see it, and the people who killed in the Holocaust, they didn't see it. And people who survived the Holocaust, many of them had said, how could it be with such great evil that there's a God who allows this to happen? Only many years later can we say, you know what, something good happened of it. Now let's go to October 7th, because you asked about October 7th. This is something which our generation went through. Forget about the earlier generations with the Holocaust for a moment. Our generation, we see horrible things happen on October 7th. So how do we understand that? So again, none of us can say why specific bad things happen to specific people. And everybody who was killed by an Arab was killed al Kiddush Hashem. And it's a tremendous chus for them in Shemayim. So anybody who was killed in the Holocaust, they died al Kiddush Hashem, it's a tremendous chus for them. And they, I'm sure, went straight to Gan Eden. That's not, but still, to us, it's very difficult that such terrible things happen to Jews, and for especially the people left behind with orphans, widows, and they have to suffer. So how do we understand the suffering? So again, we can't say why it happened. We can also see a remarkable thing has happened. You know, they have now. There's a popular Israeli singer. I forget what the name of the singer is, and he came with a song. He said about men. I know, me and my friends, we go with tzitzis without a yarmulke. And girls, they go with a dress once a week. You know, once a week they wear a skirt. And this has become a trend in Israeli society. And there's a definite raising of feeling of a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you can see it in the culture in Israel today, that as a result of October 7th, and it seems counterintuitive, because you think, you know, it should be the opposite. It should be that if this terrible suffering went on, then people start questioning. No, but more people came to a recognition, a sense of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think probably because in the final analysis, there was a miraculous recovery very quickly, and Am Yisrael clearly survived and was able to defeat Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and all these things. And we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a plan here. So again, we can't understand, certainly in the short term, why bad things happen. We can see in the long term that things perhaps have a positive purpose. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a plan, and October 7th, again, it's only 2 years later. We can't know. The Holocaust also, the state of Israel only came about at least 3 years later, and who knows, people then for sure didn't yet see it until much later how positive Am Yisrael would be in Eretz Yisrael. So too, we today can't necessarily see fully why October 7th had to happen. And we might never be able to see why October 7th had to happen, but we can see it had a positive impact on the Jewish people. We can see, and a lot of the Tehillim which were said, and a lot of the Torah which was learned, and a lot of the Chesed which went on. This is something which Am Yisrael grew from. There was a famous non-Jewish philosopher. His name was Nietzsche. Nietzsche said, "That which does not kill me builds me." Everybody grows from adversity. You don't grow from things being easy and always smooth. You grow from having to face challenges. And our bitachon HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that those challenges which we face in life, whether we understand them or not, are there for us to grow for them. Yeah.
So say that there's like Holocaust survivors and we like talk about them. But do you think that there's maybe a such thing as a I don't know what this word's called, but like an October 7th survivor who survived like the Nova Festival or who survives captivity, like in later generations, like how we have Holocaust survivors now? Will there be like like in later generations?
It could be, but you see already now that the survivors who were in captivity, a lot of them go around the world, and they actually talk about how their Emunah while they're in captivity, even they're not from. They're not Shomer Torah mitzvahs, but they never put on film their lives, they never down their lives. When they were in captivity, they sensed a special sense of mission and purpose. And yes, someday maybe there'll be names, not numbers, for October 7th survivors. Who knows? Yeah. Yes.
I have two things. One, when you said earlier.
Let me just check what's on.
When you said earlier.
You have to stop? Okay.
Like there's like Samuel was also like when you said earlier, like it's like a reflection of him. It's like we're reflected of his mitos and like all of his like character traits and like his different like Rahman and all that stuff. Also.
I didn't say that. That may be true, but I didn't say that. Okay, that's a long discussion. About Kadosh Baruch Hu's midos and his midos towards us. And there's a long discussion among Jewish philosophers if Hashem even has midos, because those midos are how He relates to us. But that's a very long discussion. But ask the question anyway.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, so that's your question. What was your question?
No, I didn't really thought. My sister, there was a hostage came to her school, and like two hostages, they were both like, I think they were planning on getting engaged before they got taken, and they were both taken, and then the girls like set up the engagement for when all the hostages came home, and they got engaged and they came to my sister's school to like speak and everything.
Yeah, so that it's amazing, and the people wounded in the war, people who lost limbs, right? And they come out with this tremendous sense of emunah that we're doing the work of HaKadosh Baruch Hu when we went to war, and how we trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us out in the rest of our lives. It's a stunning thing which all of us can learn from. And again, does it give us a full why? No, but it gives a perspective that Hashem has a master plan, and things are part and parcel of that master plan. Okay, girls, thank you very much. You were great as usual. Keep asking questions. We should have many more sessions like this.